Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our online experience we're calling A Change of Pace. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas and are as excited as we are about the coming new year. We want to say a special thank you to all of our incredible crew that might be gathered or tuning in this morning. We started doing our online-only service the week after Christmas in an effort to slow down or change our pace and give opportunity for those of you who serve so faithfully each week a chance to rest and enjoy time with your families before we jump into the next year. This year, we decided to depart from our typical online experience for another change of pace and have a conversation with a close friend of COTFC, Rob Wegner. So top off your coffee and enjoy your breakfast, and we hope you enjoy our conversation this morning.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Today we're going to talk about what does life look like after we let go of the desire to control the pace and the schedule and the way that we try to live our day to day and tap into more what God has designed for us. And I cannot think of a better person to have with us to talk about this today than our good friend, Rob Wegner. Rob is, well, you've heard his name a lot, and you may have seen his face in some of our Find Your Place videos. He is a dear friend, a mentor, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear from him today too, as we jump into our conversation. And he's, thank you, Rob, for being with us.
Glad to be a part of this conversation and
Yeah.
have a deep love and affection for the people of the Church of the Four Corners. We were talking right before this video shoot about the blurring of the lines between the people of God in the city. When heaven looks on Kansas City, heaven doesn't see multiple churches. There's one church, there's one body, and I feel that deeply with the people of the Church of the Four Corners. I feel that with you, brother, big time.
Same. Man. You and your work in the underground and even with New Thing has been so instrumental for us finding our identity as a church congregation, as a body, but then even helping so many of our people find their identity in Jesus and stepping out of maybe some of the understandings that we had, the way that church in our relationship with God should work culturally, but then understanding what does it actually look like biblically to follow Jesus and to have relationship with him, have our identity rooted in him. And I can't think of the countless people that even just through Find Your Place have grown in their faith and their relationship with Jesus. And we're just really thankful for this relationship. And so, guys, Rob's the man. It's gonna be awesome. One of the things that we were thinking about when it came to this putting together this online experience is what's something that's going to be really valuable for folks moving into 2025. Traditionally, we would put together just an online representation of our normal Sunday experience with, have some worship, have just a teaching from the Word, and that's all great. But is there something that we could do that could set people up as they're moving into 2025, making New Year's resolutions, that could help them maybe even like figure out what are the actual resolutions, what are the things that I want to focus on going to 2025. I'm trying to say all those numbers all at the same time. 25. But what are the things that I could actually focus on that aren't even necessarily just what I want, but what does God have for me? What does he want for my life? And what are the things that I could change? Because that's what resolutions are. They're the things that we want to change we think will make our life better. And so what are the things that I could change or that God would want me to change that could help me get to the place that my heart really wants to be, that my life really wants to be, where I'm living fully alive in Jesus and flourishing at every level. And so this is some things that you have a pretty good handle on, or have had opportunities to learn about and teach even. And so how did you start thinking that this was something that was important to learn about even? Like,
Yeah, it's
before we even break down what does it look like. When did you decide like this is something that I need to shift into? Or something
yeah,
like
it
that?
was a extraordinary amount of pain.
Yeah, it's a big catalyst sometimes.
Yeah. I was Michelle and I were invited to join a new church plant, and so it's all this entrepreneur kind of endeavor.
Yeah,
and we were able to basically given this opportunity to build a student and young adult ministry kind of from the ground up. And man, we hit the ground running. I grew up in a household where I learned how to work and work hard, and I had no boundaries. And so it turned into a scenario where, looking back, it probably wasn't uncommon to work 80 hours.
Oh,
and it would go up into triple digits on occasion.
Are
like,
you serious?
yeah, it was insane, literally. But I didn't know it was insane.
Yeah, that does sound painful.
It does, yeah. It was literally an addiction, but I didn't know that at the time. And later on, much later on in life, I realized this was actually being driven by a lot of past trauma in my life and a lot of dysfunction in my family's system, and it was all part of my coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
But I was still too young to see that then. There came a moment where I remember I was lying on my couch in my apartment, and I didn't know this, but I was having a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And I was in this zombie-like state and almost frozen. And that was the beginning of the wake-up call. Realized this state of being and this pace of life isn't going to be sustainable. Like, I'm, in my early 20s and I'm burning out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and it actually scared me. So for Michelle and I, we began to do a deep dive into spiritual formation, and really trying to dig into what has been passed down through the centuries that would lead to a rhythm of life that would help us stay deeply connected with Jesus, to live in the kind of community that would lead to the embodiment of the kind of love that Jesus talked about, and that would also keep us on mission, like advancing the kingdom and making new disciples. And so we began to learn about the importance of rhythm. The way that we've started to think about it, there's design specs for human beings. So how has God designed us?
Yeah.
And if you look at the book of Genesis, you begin to see rhythms.
Yeah.
And so you all have to take a look for yourself and decide, do you think these are just descriptive, or is there something here that goes way, way deeper? Like, is this actually about something that is like programmed into how reality works?
Yeah.
Which is profound.
Right.
And so for us,
Yeah,
we began to look and go, you get this picture in creation, for example. God creates, and he's saying it's good over and over again. And you get this rhythm of, there was morning and there was evening and it was good. There was morning and there was evening, it was good. And it was morning and it was evening, it was good. There's this rhythm. Right. There's this sense of like, there was morning and there was evening, right? And then later on in Exodus, God makes it very clear to his people, I want you to take a Sabbath. So it's like work 6 and rest 1.
Yeah.
Work 6, rest 1. So there's this new rhythm. It's like 6 and 1, 6 and 1.
Which is modeled in the creation story too. God himself 6 and 1.
Exactly.
On the seventh day, yeah.
And what I was doing was like, oh no. Right. And rhythm is knowing when to be on and when to be off.
Right.
Right. When to be on, when to be off.
Well, it's a lot like breathing. Like you're breathing in and then you're breathing out.
Exactly.
Your heart is beating. There's rhythms in our bodies that are natural, and so there's rhythms in life.
Yeah. And when we live in a culture that is basically built around constant stimulation, constant onness, and it will destroy heart, mind, body, soul, and even relationships if we don't know when to be on and when to be off. And there is clearly a daily rhythm of when to be on, when to be off. There's a weekly rhythm of when to be on and when to be off. And then when you look at the story of Israel, there was this rhythm of festivals.
Yeah.
And there was even pilgrimage built into some of these festivals. So when you add up the travel time and all that, God gave them about a 6-week vacation package. And like, he would say, do no work.
Right.
And God was deadly serious about this. Like, we forget, for example, the Sabbath is in the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because we take things very seriously. Like, I don't murder people.
Right.
I don't steal, but we'll brag like, I haven't taken a day off in 6 months.
Yeah.
Like we would say like, hey, I killed 6 people this week.
Yeah. You're not bragging about like, guys, I actually stole 3 cars this weekend.
Exactly.
It's pretty awesome.
But we'll brag about how much we work and that we don't ever take a break.
Yeah.
Which is, it talks about, it shows the sickness of our culture.
Yeah, like
or even maybe our family system or whatever.
Well, even the fact that like our society could view that as something impressive is like, okay, our culture as a whole has adopted as that's something noble that is to be strived for, is like work harder, produce more, and ultimately because we're a consumer society, and in order to consume, you have to produce. So we're always, it's produce and consume, produce and consume. And the more you can produce, the more valuable you are to society. It's so interesting. I think, like the only people that would maybe naturally be impressed by our desire to work all the time would be the people who work for, just so that way you can produce more for them.
Yeah.
But that's not actually helping anybody, is it?
No, it's not. And that's a great point. Like what's underneath all of this is lies about who God is and who we are. It's always about identity. We're either operating out of the economy that says, I am what I do. I am what others think about me.
Yeah.
And that is a constant roller coaster. It's a constant Olympic sport that I can never place in.
Yeah.
Or if I place in, it's for 3 seconds and then I'm disqualified again.
Yeah, because then perception shifts and things change, and your identity is now something that's fickle. Because it's not rooted in something, foundational. It's rooted in perception. That changes all the time.
And when you rest, this is the thing. Things like silence and solitude and rest, it is an act of resistance against those lies. It's like, no, I can rest because God is my Father and He's my provider and He is abundance and He is kind and He is compassionate and I am the beloved. And I am a temple of the Holy Spirit and I am a disciple of Jesus and I believe that He is the master at the art of living. And so He knows more about everything than I do. And so I can trust what He has to say about my pace of life and my rhythms. So when I take a Sabbath, it's an act of resistance against this culture that's obsessed with speed and stimulation. And I am what I do and I am what others think and all of that. It's like, no, I am unplugging from the matrix. I'm saying no to all that and I'm trusting. And when people don't take a Sabbath, to me, that's one of the cues. It's one of the big giveaways. Like when someone's a disciple of Jesus, and I'm not like judging people, but it's like an automatic cue of a concern for me. Because it takes courage to actually to trust God at that level.
There's a humility in it too. Like it takes a humble heart to say and to actually put into practice. It doesn't take a lot to say it because it's something that we all know. We have the head knowledge to know that God knows more than me. But then to actually put it into practice takes our engaging our heart, which means because when we constantly try to maintain control and like, if we can manufacture the results that we want to get from our life, if we just do it our way, that's a pride issue almost too. In that like, because if we continue to resist the opportunity to give God control of our life and to actually fall into line with the way that He wants us to live and continue to keep going back to what we want, we're saying to him in our actions, even though we might believe it in our head and with our words, that he knows a better way. Until we actually begin to live that way, we're living the way that we know better. We're telling him that with our actions.
And that's the interesting thing too, when you begin to live, one way you can talk about is divert daily, withdraw weekly, abandon annually.
Yeah.
So when you begin to have like a daily rhythm where it's like, hey, I'm going to make space in the morning for silence and solitude. And then maybe I'm going to pause at lunchtime to create another space where I'm intentionally returning to Jesus. I'm intentionally trying to remember to, okay, I'm abiding today. I'm remaining in Jesus. I'm going to have another time, maybe in the evening before I go to bed. You're thinking about these kind of spiritual habits and rhythms that you're building into your daily rhythms. And then you're planning a Sabbath. And a Sabbath isn't just, I do nothing all day.
Right.
You're actually filling it with the things that recreate you. So if you love to be outdoors, it's like, how can I stack with outdoor times? If you love to cook, I'm going to make something really fun that day. If you're an artist, it's like, I'm going to go see a movie and I'm going to maybe work on a song that day. You know, if you're an athlete, it's like, man, how can I like do 2 pickup games that day? Or, you know, you're thinking about what are the things that recreate me and how can I put boundaries around the stuff that's going to actually invade and destroy, you know what I mean?
Right.
The work part, and rest and renew and reconnect with God and my most important relationships. Eventually, as you cultivate your Sabbath, it will become your best day of the week. It's like you can't wait to get to Sabbath, right? And then the abandon annually is like whatever vacation time you get, take all of it and plan it in advance. Like if you have 3 weeks, November, December, the year beforehand, put it all in and plan for it to be restorative and not just, I'm going to dump every project I got to do at home into this week and I'm exhausted, or, you know what I mean?
This is going to be the week that we finish our deck.
Yeah.
And
that's, you got to think about how to use it in a way that's restorative.
Right.
But here's the thing I wanted to bring up. When people sometimes begin to build these rhythms, it's actually very disruptive, because when you begin to make space and you begin to practice silence and solitude and you begin to come off of the crack of the constant stimulation, things start coming up and out.
Oh yeah.
And it can be scary. And it's like, no, I think I want to stay on the crack.
Right. Well, we develop a level of comfort with it, and it, like, even though it's hard and it's like crushing us, there's like there's a comfort in it because it's familiar and it's easy, maybe, because it doesn't force us to like deal with the stuff that's going on internally. It like becomes a coping mechanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where this is where I mentioned this earlier. Like, have I actually developed a 3 and a 12? Like Jesus had Peter, James, and John.
Yeah.
And he had his 12.
Yeah.
Where do I have this consistent set of very important relationships where I'm doing appropriate transparency, deeper with the 3, and the 3 is where I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to actually tell the truth about my life with some other human beings, and in a way that's very, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm confessing before God and these few people my needs, my desires, my brokenness.
Yeah.
We're going to carry this all together to Jesus.
Yeah. And you're all doing it with one another.
Exactly.
It's not just I have my team that I confess to.
Yeah. And it's not a morality patrol.
Right.
You know, it's not like doing penance so that like, okay, now I can feel better. It really is about a place where we're building shalom together, and we're appreciating one another, and we're listening and validating one another. We're trying to level up, like emotionally and spiritually and relationally. And that only happens when we confess our weakness.
Yeah.
And in those spaces, we can start mediating the grace of God to one another in a way that can never happen in isolation. I'll never level up if I'm off alone. And then the 12 is a bigger space that mediates Jesus to us in an even bigger way. Like no 1 or 2 people can mediate enough of Jesus to me for me to be changed. Like we need him coming through other people,
Mm-hmm.
me seeing how he's being formed and shaped, and aspects of him that come through stronger in you than
Yeah.
it does through that person, that more extended spiritual family.
Yeah.
We can't grow up without that,
Yeah.
you know? So that's where it's both like the spiritual habits, the rhythms, and the community. You start combining those together,
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah.
you're going to start to see a sustainable life where I'm becoming more and more like Jesus.
Yeah.
It's the kind of the forgotten ways, man.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
even in the
like,
church, it's like a forgotten way,
yeah.
you know, where people just get stuck into like, I go to a weekend service, like I volunteer an hour or two, and I'm like in a group, but we're not really doing life together. We're not really developing spiritual habits together. We're not talking about these kind of rhythms we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wonder why. It's like, why aren't I changing? Why do I still
maybe
feel
not creating
empty?
that deep vulnerability with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like I've been really trying to learn about righteousness lately, and like the idea of like righteousness being the reconciling of all things back to their original design and intent. In thinking about, like, this is kind of like, even in the garden, and like you referenced Genesis, like how did God, what was his original design for us? And then not even just as in our lives individually, but our lives in our relationships with one another. And like this, some of what you're talking about, like makes me think of that, like God gave us each other for a reason. So that way we can build each other up and build our lives together. Not to, I mean, there's lots of other different reasons we have relationships with one another, but like, what is a reconciled community look like that functions in the way that God's original design was? And like, what is the flourishing in the, like, what's the fruit and what's the experience of that like? And
Yeah.
is that something that even, can we attain that?
Yeah.
And,
Let me give you a practical example of what I think that looks like.
yeah.
Like different relational and emotional skills, we actually learn them from other people. They don't just pop into us out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I don't even think God just goes poof, and suddenly I can do this new thing.
Yeah. Right.
Right? It actually gets mediated through human relationships.
Yeah. Very rarely does God just go poof and then you're there.
Right.
He's a God of like process and patience and time. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, Brian Phipps and Dan Sutherland.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Our church, we love those guys so much.
And they're both amazing,
yeah.
really gifted shepherds. These guys, I was in a triad with them for years.
Dude.
And then I was also doing life with them.
Yeah.
I got to really see up close a lot of different relational and emotional skills when it comes to shepherding people. And it was like a master's class.
Yeah.
And I have become a much better shepherd. And God's design is for us to learn these different aspects of Jesus' capability. He does every relational, emotional, spiritual skill perfectly, but he's mediating them through different people. So simply doing these different rhythms and even different spiritual and relational kind of habits alone, it won't get the outcomes we're shooting for.
Yeah.
Like you need the 3 and the 12.
Yeah.
And doing it in community over time.
Yeah. Before we get to a segue of you said the word shalom earlier, and I just want to take a second because I've learned more about the meaning of that word than it just being like the Hebrew word for peace. Like shalom has a lot more depth to it than just the thing that you would say in a greeting or a leaving somebody.
Yeah, tell me what you've learned.
My understanding of it, and it's something that I want to learn more of, but is that shalom is more of like an all-encompassing, holistic peace. It's not the absence of stress. It's like a settledness of your spirit and your soul. And there's a shalom that a person can have, but then there's a shalom even for creation. That is, I mean, it doesn't necessarily feel that much different than like the idea of righteousness being reconciled life and creation back to God's original intent. There's a wholeness
yeah,
and of life.
yeah, fullness.
Yes, fullness, the fulfilled life.
Yeah. Dr. Plantinga
Yeah.
describes it as universal flourishing, where everything is at just the right amount in every way, in relationship to everything else. And that's what we're called to, especially the book of Ephesians has that theme of fullness that runs through it. And Ephesians 1 paints a picture of this cosmic fullness of everything in heaven and earth being reconciled, and that Jesus is filling everything in every way. Like all that Jesus is filling everything in every way. That's where all of this is headed. And then Ephesians 3 talks about us being filled with the fullness. So us being completely filled with shalom.
Yeah.
And then Ephesians 4 talks about the church being filled with the fullness up to maturity, And that's God's desire, that shalom will happen at the most microscopic level in us, like down literally to the cellular level, all the way out to the very end of the cosmos and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm giving my life to, man.
That sounds like a good thing to give your life to.
Yeah. There's nothing bigger or better.
So what are like just a few things that you think would be just little steps? Because the same way that God isn't a God that just does things, poof, you're there. People aren't going to like make a resolution for the way they want to live in 2025 and then boom, like you found, like now you've gone from this, like I'm almost on the brink of burnout to snap my fingers and now I've achieved shalom. So like what are some like just little practices, baby steps, things that somebody could take from this and apply into 2025?
Yeah, a few things I'd recommend. One, if you go to kcunderground.org and go to toolkit, and you can search also on our website, we have a Sabbath design tool.
Yes. Oh, it's so good too.
Yeah, and that is something you could sit down and it helps you design a Sabbath.
Yeah.
And even there's helps you think through what it would take for you to actually get to living into a Sabbath. If folks would move towards practicing a Sabbath next year, I think the difference between 2024 and 2025 would be profound.
Yeah.
Another thing that would have a similar and profound impact, just the simple pattern of looking at your day, and this practice goes like all the way back to the temple. And sometimes it's called offices, sometimes it's called praying the hours. And when it's done formally, it's done 7 times a day, but that's a big bite. But
sure.
But if people think about like 3 times a day, like when you rise in the morning, at lunchtime, and before you go to bed, and even if in the beginning it's just 5 minutes, like to pause and to create a space to pray and to weave the scriptures into one of those, and just start by reading one of the Gospels, like go to the words of Jesus. You can use discovery Bible study questions. What does this passage tell me about God? What does this passage say about people in general? What is this passage saying to me? How could I live it? And write a little I will statement. And then who could I share it with?
Yeah.
So begin your morning, create a space for prayer and conversation with Jesus, scripture engagement. Then at lunchtime, create another 5-minute space to return to him, try to fall back again, abide, remain, and then to end the day with the Lord. And in the evenings when I'm praying, one of the things I do is I think through my whole life. You can do this in about 5 minutes. And I just return it all to the Lord. It's like naked I came into this world, right? Naked I'm going out, right?
Yeah.
And I literally think through all the things first, and I just return them all to the Lord. It's like that bank account, that retirement stuff, the house, all that. And then I start going through all like kind of my work responsibilities, like, my role with New Thing, then the Kansas City Underground. And then I start going through all my most important relationships.
Yeah.
And then it gets down to my kids and my wife. And then I start giving my body back to God.
Yeah.
And then I'm giving basically my mind
Yeah.
It's like eventually I'm going to have dementia. My mind's not going to work anymore, you know, mind and body. And then eventually all that I have left is this light that is the image of God. And I'm like, that could never be taken from me.
Yeah.
And then I go to bed.
Wow.
And I end every night like that, man. And then I get up in the morning. I'm like, good morning, Jesus.
Yeah.
I got another one today.
Yeah.
You know, and so if folks would plan a Sabbath
Man.
and like do that check-in 3 times a day, I think that's a simple place to start.
Yeah, I love that too, because the Sabbath was like, and the check-in, and we talk a lot about abiding in
and that's the goal. It's not, it's like, it's really about, I call it a check-in because it's like, I'm trying to live awake all day, aware of the presence of Jesus.
Yeah, it feels like like an entryway into that, because I think sometimes abiding may feel overwhelming. It's just like, if you go from where your relationship with Jesus is relegated to, you know, sometimes it's just relegated to Sunday, and then you're like, oh, this is supposed to be my life, and then you give him a little bit of time in the morning, or like, you know, here and there. It's like, how do I learn how to incorporate him into my entire day? And so, like, having those checkpoints, even just 3 to start with,
and that's where this kind of thing can be helpful,
for sure,
because you could set it 3 times a day.
Yeah, you can set
and
it.
that's why they used to ring the bells.
Oh yeah.
Go, oh, it's time to stop and pray. It's time to check in. Right.
That's awesome.
I grew up in a city where they still ring the bells.
Oh man.
And I grew up never knowing you're actually supposed to stop and pray. I just thought, I guess it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah, it's like, how many bells are there? Okay, it's 11 o'clock. That means it's almost lunchtime. Awesome. Like, I'm hungry.
And if you see it as a chance to like wake up again,
you
know, and return to Jesus. And if you found that you've been fast asleep, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Don't drink a gallon of toxic shame. Just go, oh, thank you, Lord, for waking me up. Yeah. I'm back in.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Jesus is not, he does not want us to feel guilt or shame, especially not when we first come back to him. He's taking that stuff away. And so when we come to him, like, we may feel the response of like, oh, I'm so sorry I've been absent, or I haven't had this, you haven't been a priority. And he's like, no, you're here now. We'll just be here. And yeah, that's good. That's a good thing to remember, because one of the things that we there's so much toxic shame associated with failed New Year's resolutions sometimes. Yep. Where like this is not one of those things. Yeah, that we should.
That's what's great about the Divert Daily, Withdrawal Weekly, Abandon Annually. You get an endless number of redos. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like, let's keep going.
Well, Rob, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have a couple other options. You know, one of the things you highlighted was the relationships, and we've got a new small group semester that's starting soon. If you haven't done Find Your Place yet, that's a really great opportunity to get into a room with people that are also trying to find their place and find their way into taking next steps towards some of the things that we've been talking about, living a life that's connected to Jesus and abiding in him, and how does this all fit together? And so that's an addition to the Sabbath and the checkpoints throughout the day with Jesus. Those are a couple other options that you could jump into. But Rob, I love you so much. I'm so thankful for you. I wish, man, I could just do this for another 2 hours, but I'm so thankful for the opportunity to glean off of the life that you've lived and the wisdom that you've been given. And just thank you for loving our church. It's
I do, and this was a blast. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope you have well, it's weird because we're filming this before Christmas, so I hope you have and had.
We had a great
Christmas.
We had a great Christmas.
Yeah, you can just speak it into and then and that your New Year's is awesome too.
Thank you.
But, yeah, thanks again. Thank you guys. We love you.
Grace and peace.
We hope you found our conversation today valuable. We have lots of opportunities and steps that we can take or incorporate into our lives to slow down and attune our lives to the rhythm that God wants us to live by. Our giving options are going to show up on the bottom of the screen, but I want to highlight a couple of those opportunities that Jordan mentioned. Our next Find Your Place group starts on January 12th. This group is a chance to gather with other people who are doing their best to navigate their journey with Jesus and understand how and why they were made. We also have a new small group semester that's starting soon. You can jump into one of several groups that we have and begin building relationships that will help you grow your faith and relationship with Jesus every week. You can sign up at our small group fair that's coming up, or go to cotfc.com/groups. Well, thank you again for joining us. We hope you have a safe and wonderful new year, and we'll see you back at the City House on January 5th as we begin our journey through the book of Acts.